Hello and welcome to Nanapod, a podcast dedicated to the fantastic manga written by A. Yazawa. I'm Crystal, and I'm joined by my best girl Kirsten as we dissect this manga, discussing everything from the emotions, the cultural impact, as well as any headcanons that might be floating around in our brains. With this podcast, we hope to preserve a shoujo staple that sadly hasn't been talked about in a very long time. So come with us. We're waiting for you in apartment 707. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nanapod. So, we are picking up here in volume 19, chapter 70. And if we are reading the story of Nana, Hachi Komatsu and Nana Osaki meet by chance on a train headed for Tokyo. Their personalities and the environments they grew up in are very different, but by fate or by chance, they meet again and become roommates. Weekly search prints an expose on Nana's long-lost mother. Hachi reads the story and, guessing what Nana might be going through, decides to move in with her until Ren comes back. With the tour coming up, Blast has been practicing hard, but Shin's acting strange. Masato, Mai, and Yasu's worst fears come true, and Shin gets arrested right before the first day of the tour. Trying to keep the tour from getting cancelled, Nana swallows her pride and asks Ren to replace Shin on bass. But Ren accuses her of only thinking of herself and won't do it. In the end, the tour gets cancelled, and Blast is forced into indefinite hiatus. Nana doesn't know what to do, but then there's talk of her going solo. To uphold the band's contractual obligations, Nana decides to sing alone, but... And we open with the narration. Says, I fall asleep every night holding tight to the good old days that drift farther away when each morning comes. I'm trying not to get swept away by the waves at night. Because I have a kid, we are switching narration to Hachi now, because I have work, there are many reasons why I can't go look for Nana right now. But mostly I think I'm just scared of reaching out and having my hand brushed away. And now we are in the future with little Satsuki, and she's looking through a window at all of these chocolates and cake. And then here comes more adult Hachi, and she says, Satsuki, you run off every chance you get. Hey, hold my hand. And Satsuki says, Mommy, are you buying chocolate? Valentine's Day's coming soon. And then she gets like these dot eyes, and she says, Mommy's not buying, I'll make some. And then Satsuki says, I want to make some too. And she looks back at her and says, Satsuki, you know, Valentine's Day isn't a day where you can just eat as much chocolate as you want, but I can see why. Satsuki says, I know. It's a day when you give chocolates to someone you like, right? And then Nana's got like the, oh? And then she's like, who are you gonna give them to? And then Satsuki has like these little blush lines, but kind of like this, Mommy is so nosy. And she's like, Daddy, heart. She says, nuh-uh. She says, your big brother? She says, no way. And then she's like, I know, Yasu. And she's like, no, geez, Mom, that's stupid. And then she gets like a sweat drop. And then Hachi says, don't act like that. You'll hurt Yasu's feelings. Yasu treats you like his own. And then Satsuki says, I like Yasu as much as I like Daddy, but I don't like him like that. And then Hachi's got like her hand over her mouth like, oh, and Satsuki is stomping away with her little blush lines. Yes, nothing like having Zeus and Hades as your daddy. And then Hachi is like, hey, Satsuki, who is it? Why won't you tell me? And Satsuki's got the dots. And Hachi's like, I won't tell anyone. You can tell mommy, please. And then Satsuki's like, but mommy's got a big mouth. And then Hachi's like, if you tell me, I'll help you make the best chocolate in the world, heart. And then Satsuki's like, really? And Hachi's like, I promise. And then Satsuki's thinking with her dots. And then she says, it's Shin, heart. And then Hachi's got like this, what? Look on her face. And Satsuki's thinking of just pretty adult Shin. And it's just like sigh with a heart and the blush lines. And now we're here with more adult Junko at the Takakura house 201. And she is just laughing. And then Hachi's like, it's not funny, Jun. Falling in love with a good-for-nothing ex-con. And Junko says, how can you say that? And Hachi's like, well, he's too old anyway. And Jun says, Satsuki definitely got your DNA. Nana, she likes those pretty boys. What a life she's got ahead of her. And, man, there's all like this little DNA, like, strand behind Hachi, and she kind of looks like someone has hit her in the stomach because she's like, ugh, with all of the blushes over her face. There's a whoosh in the background. And then Jun says, and what have you been doing since then? And she looks over at Jun, and Jun looks over at her very seriously. And Hachi says, I'm thinking about going to the UK when Satsuki has her spring break. And Jun says, you're gonna go do what? And Hachi says, Takumi's trying to find out whether the place where Nana's supposedly singing really exists. So I hope we can find out by then. And Jun says, I'm not talking about the guru. And Hachi looks over and she says, aren't you getting divorced? Dun dun dun. Drop, guys. And Hachi looks kind of, yeah, and she's like, no, there's no reason at this point. And Jun says, yes, there is, a lot of them. And Hachi says, there are more reasons not to. And then here comes Kyosuke. And Jun has kind of this sad look on her face. And he says, Junko, I got a meeting. And he's like, so I'm off to Yotsuya. Play nice, girls. And then Junko's walking him to the door and says, it's Sunday and you still gotta work? But it's probably better than hanging around Nana. What about dinner? He says, I'll eat out. She says, that's cool. And Hachi says, hey, where's Satsuki? And he says, I was reading to her and she fell asleep. And yeah, she's in this little bed all asleep with a Z. And Hachi says, oh, but in someone else's bed? Sorry. And Jun says, it's all right, let her sleep. And Hachi says, but she's got school tomorrow. She won't be able to sleep tonight. And she goes to wake her up and says, Satsuki. And then Jun says, you're staying for dinner, right? What do you want? And then Hachi's like, I can cook. And Jun says, let's order in. We're both busy. We can take a break sometimes. And Hachi, who has now picked her daughter up, has like this, all right, yes. And now we are here in 302 back at their place, and there's a ring of the phone, and Satsuki says, we're home. And Hachi says, the phone's ringing, and she slams the door. And Satsuki goes, I'll get it. And she just runs into the house. And Hachi says, hey, Satsuki, shoes off. But Satsuki's not listening. She has gone to the phone and she's like, hello, Ichino's residence. Oh, heart, Daddy! And she's like, yeah, I'm good, Heart. Today, Mommy and I went shopping and ate pizza at June's house. And Hachi says, give me the phone, Satsuki. And she's like, no, I want to talk more. And she's like, later, after you take off your shoes, wash your hands, and brush your teeth. And then Satsuki's like, all right. And she runs off to do just that. And Hachi says, hello, Takumi. And he says, so you don't have to wash your hands and brush your teeth first? And she's got this, like, oh my god, look on her face. And I am so sad. He's cut his hair. And it makes me depressed. I don't like it. I don't like him with short hair. And he says, adults are so selfish. And she says, so why are you calling? What happened? And he says, everything's all right here, but we found out where that place is. And she gets these big eyes like, what, really? And then there's these random men in the background and saying, Takumi. And she's like, really? And he says, yeah, I emailed you about it, so check your inbox. And she's starting to cry. And she says, all right, thank you. And he says, no, thank Naoki. He ran around looking for the place. And she says, all right, I'll call him. And he says, see you soon. And she's like, wait, Satsuki wants to talk to you. And he says, I want to talk to her too, but I'm busy right now. I'll call back later. And Hachi's looking up above her laptop here, and there's a picture of Ren above it. And she says, when? How's Ren doing? And he says, don't worry about him. And then there's a click and a buzz. And Hachi's got the blank eyes. And then she turns her computer on with a tap. And the think boxes say, hey, Nana. And then it's like trailing off. And now we are with adult Rira. And she is just singing along and to some music that's playing. And then she's like, what a beautiful song. And she turns around and smiles and says, Ren's such a genius. And we see, for the first time, this little boy sitting on the bench. This is Ren. And I know that way back when Melissa and I had actually discussed this, and everyone was like, oh my god, it's Rira's little boy, and it's so awful and all this. No, guys, no. No. 2 children. There are 2 children that Hachi and Takumi have had. And you can tell that this is also Hachi's son because of the color of his hair. And I know some people would be like, no, it's like Rira's because she's also blonde. Yeah, but his hair would probably be more textured. And it's not. And he's got Takumi's eyes. And Satsuki also has Takumi's hair. And she's got her mama's eyes. So, yeah. And we don't know the situation. Not really. We don't honestly know, what the relationship between Takumi and Rira is at this point. If I had to take a guess, I would say that they're probably together in the future, but we don't know. So, the narration boxes are like, 1 month until spring break. Please don't run off anywhere again. And I won't run away either. And now, slingshotting back into the past, there is a slide of a box back here in apartment 707. And it is a chocolate cake. And Nana's looking at it. And it says love on it. And Hachi looks so pleased. And Nana says, what's this for? And she says, come on. You really don't know? It's Valentine's Day. And Nana says, no, I know. I already got more chocolate than I can eat from my fans. I don't need any from you. And then she picks up the strawberry and Hachi says, don't eat it. And Nana says, what the hell? And Hachi says, you gotta give it to Ren. And Nana says, huh? Because Hachi is thinking about Nana giving it to him and saying, a token of my love, with a heart, like she would ever. But then she's like, you were busy and forgot to buy him chocolates, right? So you can give him this instead, heart. And then she slaps the cover back on. And Nana's looking at her like, oh, okay. And she's like, it's none of your business. And Hachi says, stop acting so tough. Take this and go home tonight, all right? And she says, this is my home. I hunted it and found it. And Hachi, is thinking about way back when they had agreed to split this place together and said, so it's a deal. Dear Nana. And then they're kind of quiet for a moment. And then Hachi says, what happened with Ren? And Nana says, nothing. And Hachi's looking down into her cup. And she's like, actually, I know she's thinking this, but why can't she confide in me? And now we are back at the dorms with Miyu, and she says, then Nana called Ren and asked him to replace Shin on bass, but he refused. And she's like, that's why Nana's mad. I think she's hurt. She's remembering what she was told. And Miyu goes on to say, more than actually being mad, she swallowed her pride and latched onto him, but he rejected her. And Hachi's got like this, oh no, look on her face. And then Miyu says, but Nana's selfish. If you think about Ren's situation, you wouldn't ask him to do something that crazy. And she shouldn't let on that she thinks of Trapness as the competition. Ren can't do anything, and I'm sure it really stresses him out. And then Hachi takes a beat and says, but the reason she considers Trapnest her competition is 'cause Ren betrayed Blast. And Miyu says, I don't think it was a betrayal. Ren just chose the most successful path. He didn't hold Blast back or do anything bad to them. And then Hachi's got like this almost like realization face. And Miyu says, even if he did betray them, why should Ren have to sacrifice everything for Nana? That's just atonement. It's not fair. And then back here in 707, Hachi sets her cup down and is thinking, does Nana consider Trapnest her enemy because of my betrayal as well? And she looks up at her and is like, but I want to do something for Nana, and not 'cause I want to be forgiven. It must be the same for Ren, too. And then there's a ding-dong at the door, and it's Masato. And she says, good morning. And she's like, oh, Hachiko, you stayed over again? Thank you. And then Nana says, all right, I'm out. I'll eat the cake when I come back, so leave it here. And then Hachi's got like the dots with like the, just kind of the, I made it so you can give it to Ren. Why are you being so stubborn? And then Masato says, there's a lot of reporters downstairs again. And Nana says, really? Do they have chocolates for me? Heart. And Hachi's thinking, come on, Nana. It's good that she decided to go solo, but I don't want her neglecting her relationship. I've got to get them back together by any means necessarily. And she's got the, like, almost like flames in the background that are going crackle, crackle. It says, with my perfectly potent love cake. Yeah. Now there's a ring of a phone. And it's Takumi's assistant. And he's like, good morning, Takumi. I'm downstairs waiting on ya. And he's got like the dots like, what? And there's a little like teddy bear next to him, the replacement for Nana. And he's got an angry tick and he's like opening the door and he's like, bam, Nana, I told you to wake me up at 9, but the room is empty. And there's a note next to oh, I don't even know what they're called, but it's a thing in the Be Our Guest, where there's food underneath the covering and then they open it up. I know there's something very specific that they call it. It's not a warming plate, but anyway, there's a sticky note and it says, I went over to Nana's. Please eat me. Heart. And he's like, sigh, again? I don't have time to eat. Clank. And he opens up the he opens it up, and yes, it's a chocolate cake and it's beautiful and perfect, but much like the omelet, she has put a little angry face on it again, so she's still mad at him, and I just think it's so funny. This is the best thing ever. And now he's got like a, oh God, because he's like, oh man, she's still mad at me. He's thinking, oh, what about? And it's like, because you didn't call her. And he's like, I really don't get women. It's because you don't call her, Takumi. And you were pushy. And, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. I mean, she's not telling you. She's kind of expecting you to guess, but making him stew is hilarious. And I think, is this Naoki? Yeah. He says, morning, Takumi, heart, hey. And Rira looks over at him and smiles. And then here comes Ren right up close to him and says, hello, darling, heart. And it says, freak out, as he like jumps away from him because Ren was like right next to his neck. And then Ren says, this is what you mean to me. The thump with a heart, and he's giving him a little box of chocolates. And Takumi says, I don't want it. And Ren says, that's what the receptionist Miki said to me. And Takumi's got dots, and he says, I wonder what kind of meaning. Like, please eat me, heart. And then he rips off the package and says, sure, why not? And he says, you better hurry up and make up with Nana. And then Ren looks over at him like, oh, so you know? And Takumi's like, as long as Nana keeps crashing at apartment 707, my wife will keep hanging around there. It's annoying. And Ren's got dots, and he's like, make her come home quick. And Ren says, oh, so your wife ran away from home too. And then there's a flip, like open little chocolates. And then Takumi says, where have you been staying? With who? And then Ren looks over at him and says, room 2606. And Ren is fucking with Takumi, and he honestly good, And Ren's picking up his chocolates because Takumi knows. So he's got this look, and he's like, Rira! And then there's this gulp, and Rira is looking like this, what? And her and Ren both have like the dots, and Takumi says, come here right now. And Ren has a shit-eating grin on his face a little bit like, good. He's jealous. Perfect. And now they're in her makeup room, because it says makeup room A, trap nest, Rira, and she says, it's not what you think. I let Ren have that room, and I've been staying at my Shibuya apartment. I'm sick of living out of hotels. I even got the president's permission. And then Takumi's got the dots, and he says, well, no one told me. And Narita's permission doesn't matter. And she says, I don't have to tell you every little thing. You're not even my boyfriend. And then he's got like a sweat bead, like, He says, well, go live wherever you want, but you're just helping Ren run away from home. If those two can't work it out, your plan to see Shin won't go too well either. And then she's got this very blank stare as she's looking at the mirror and says, I have no intention of seeing Shin ever again. And he's like, why not? And she turns around with a box in her hand, and it's a box of chocolates. And he just stares at it, and she says, don't take it the wrong way, but this is for how grateful I am to you, Heart. And he says, grateful? He says, I don't want any more obligatory chocolate, and I want serious chocolates even less. And she says, even if you won't accept it, I won't be consumed by my loneliness anymore. And she says, at least you acknowledge my singing, Takumi. And he's got this very sad, kind of wistful look on his face. And then there's, hey Nana. And there's a text from Hachi to Ren. And he's reading it. And it says, Nana's really sorry. And I'm really sorry. Come get her at apartment 707 tonight, please. Heart, Hachiko, heart. And Ren's looking at the phone like dots. And then Naoki's like, hey, Ren, chocolates, bad for your skin, so let me have them instead. And there's a heart. And then the think boxes are like, I'm going to see Nana, but not because I want to be forgiven. And we see Takumi as he reaches out and takes the chocolates from Rira. And it says, I still love Nana. That's all. And that is the end of the chapter, guys. I do have to say that I think the chocolates are... So, Ren had said to Rira that she is having a really hard time letting go of Takumi. And I think when they had that talk, it's possible that Rira made a decision in that moment. Not a very good one, of course, but she made a decision that she probably needed to address these feelings. And even though Takumi is married, it's unfinished business for her specifically. And again, it doesn't mean that it's right. And I know that a lot of people get really pissed because of what's about to come. And they're like, oh, well, she's so selfish, Rira's so selfish, and he's a married man. And it's like, yeah, he's also a cheater. Like, he's married, but also. So there's that part of it. And the chapter is not closed for her. And she's been kept in a tower this whole time, not allowed to go anywhere or do anything. And it's hard. So, is it right? No. But I do think that there are certain things that need to be tied up, and it's okay for Rira to want to pursue whatever this is, because she hasn't been allowed, even though it's wrong. They're still in their 20s. These mistakes are meant to be made. So, that's kind of my 2 cents on what is going on. And also, Takumi needs to address stuff as well. You know, we got in his chapter that he just thinks of her as this princess and on this pedestal, but he does love her in a very different way. And he's completely devoted to Rira in a way he is not devoted to any other woman that he's ever been with. So I think that there's something to be said for that as well. So it's possible that in the future they are actually together. And I don't think that I necessarily hate that, even though I do ship Takumi and Hachi together, because I do think that Hachi is good for him. These babies are also in need of a polycule, in my opinion. Honestly. But Takumi needs to get therapy. You know what I mean? Like he actually needs to get therapy, because I don't want no harem builders out here. But I think it would be beneficial for everybody if they were allowed to be in a polycule. So the polycule would look like Rira, Takumi, Nobu, and Shin. and they could all have a functioning relationship in that regard. Um, but anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this one. And I will see you all in the next one. Good night.